This video has been sponsored by War Thunder. With Warhammer 40K having existed for over 38 years, you are probably not surprised to learn how much the lore has changed since the early 1980s. The original vision for 40K is something completely alien to what we know and love today. It was a time of Crimson Fist poster boys. The Ultramarines were the bad guys. Primarchs were just legendary humans or ordinary space marines. And the God Emperor himself does not even remember why he is sitting upon the golden throne. It is a time of war, a grim dark future that is both the worst regime humanity has ever lived under, but it is also a time of wacky and weird 40k lore that will absolutely blow your mind that this used to be canon. So in today's video, we will be delving into the first edition of Warhammer 40k and take a look at the main differences between Space Marines from back then compared to their current counterparts. Were they just human warrior monks in power armor, or were they a lot more similar to the genetically enhanced Angels of Death we know today? How about their gene seed? Did they use the same organs? Was the Codex Astartes invented yet? And how much lore has stayed the same in the last 38 years? All that and a whole lot more esoteric lore today. It's a special one. But before we get into the video, about a week ago, I was winning a match of Horus Heresy 2.0 when suddenly a deranged Emperor's Children player walked into the store and demanded a life-changing experience. Something about realism, demanding to feel alive as he watches his enemies be torn apart in real time. Luckily for me, I have played War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, with over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 major nations that cover the range from the 1920s all the way to the modern day. But what about the death animations? He screamed. Well, don't you worry. When you destroy a target, you get to see exactly how it happened. An X-ray view that makes even Slanesh blush at how hard you penetrated the crew. The man fell silent at these insane details, so I quickly reminded him that War Thunder offers 3 distinct game modes. Arcade is made for those who crave fast-paced matches with enhanced vehicle performance and simplified physics, while Simulator mode ditches all guardrails for the ultimate challenge. And Realistic mode, the perfect middle ground, striking a balance between intensity and authenticity. But where can I play this game? He suddenly snaps. Well, as I pulled out my phone, I showed him the truth. War Thunder is available on both PC and mobile, with over 95 million players in epic PvP experiences. And you don't need any crazy hardware to play it. And if the beautifully sculpted vehicles weren't enough for you, then you can customize them however you like, adding camouflages, historical markings, and even community created decorations. He stared at me in awe and immediately went to download the game. But wait, I yelled. Use the links in the pinned comment or this video description. New and returning players on PC and consoles that haven't played the game in the last 6 months will receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms that includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Thank you, War Thunder, for sponsoring this video. Alright, let's get into the lore. The great Emperor of mankind has sat upon the golden throne of Holy Earth for over 10,000 years. Before the age of the Imperium as we know it today, there was the Age of Strife, an era in human history marked by interhuman warfare and a gradual decline in the accumulated knowledge of millennia. Before this was the Dark Age of Technology, which had brought humanity its highest scientific achievements. How or why the Dark Age of Technology happened is a mystery. The truth of the Age of Strife and how the Emperor came to rule over all of humanity is his secret. A secret the creature who sits upon the golden throne might possibly not even remember. All of that sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? It's the opening description of the setting, but it's missing something. That good old grimdark 40k goodness. Let's continue. The age of the Imperium is a time of superstition. Technology has given way to mysticism and madness, to both the peasants toiling in the fields and the warriors who roam the galaxy. The very idea of scientific thought represents a corruption of honor and religious virtue. The grim darkness of the far future is a universe filled with gods, witchcraft and magic. Warp engines must have runes. A laser gun requires the blessings of the gods of battle. But this age is also a time of great change within humanity itself, a time when more and more humans are developing powers and a vision far beyond those of their ancestors. Humans developing these abilities are known as psychics or psychers, and by many less flattering names, the most common being that of a witch. The will of the Emperor is made known through the colossal organizations of the Adeptus Terra, which in its entirety is known as the Priesthood and the Inquisition. Within the Adeptus Terra were countless millions of devoted servants and quasi-religious followers of the Emperor. The most notable warriors are the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's Inner Guard, and the Adeptus Mechanicus, who not only are the tech priest guardians of technology, but also ensure the master of mankind is maintained through the Golden Throne. While we could spend hours detailing the lore of Warhammer 40k's very first edition, analyzing every page and comparing it with its newest iteration, you will notice that many of the foundations of the setting have not changed that much. The Imperium still rules over 1 million worlds, the Emperor is still worshipped as a god, and man still enters the perils of the warp to travel the stars. And yes, our beloved Adeptus Astartes are still known as the Angels of Death. But how different are the Space Marines from 1987 compared to our current Astartes? During these early days of Warhammer, the Space Marines were known as the Legiones Astartes, yet they still formed chapters of roughly 1,000 fighting troops, with there still being 1,000 such chapters throughout the Imperium. But they are not the elite of the elite during this era. Instead, they are the main strike force of the Imperium's galaxy-traveling armies. The duty of the Space Marines is to destroy a given target, reinforce the Imperial Guard, and they are ready to travel anywhere at any time to see this duty done. So with that vibe-setting segment out of the way, let's get into the Legiones Astartes of Rogue Trader. What were they like? How different are they? The Legiones Astartes, better known as the Space Marines, are the most powerful and feared warriors within the Imperium. They recruit their brothers from savage feral planets, medieval worlds, or sprawling hive cities. Living in these conditions is brutal, with feral worlders and the scum dwelling below hive cities being particular favorites. In some cases, entire gangs are recruited from the worst depths of a hive and trained to become Space Marines. In any case, these recruits are chosen for their aggression, psychotic killer instinct, but also inherent martial traditions. Some backwater planets have entire warrior castes competing for the honor of becoming a warrior of the gods and celebrate every single time one of their men is taken. When recruited, these subjects undergo many hours of intensive training, indoctrination, biochem and psychosurgeries. This produces an incredibly skilled, violent, and borderline psychotic warrior who is still able to be controlled by the Imperium. A special black plastic carapace is merged into the natural flesh of the Space Marine, forming both a layer of protection and a form of identity tag. Funnily enough, when 40K first launched, this was most of what we knew about the Space Marine organs and implementation. It wouldn't be until 2 years later, with the Warhammer 40K Compendium, which had collected all the different White Dwarf articles, that we got actual confirmation that Space Marines were implanted with gene seed. Let's take a look at a couple of excerpts. The visitors waited in the elevator capsule while hidden pumps silently adjusted the temperature, humidity and pressure. When the doors opened, there would be no sudden draught, no breeze to alter the constant 31.7 degrees in the subterranean vault. In Laboratory 9, the most stable environment on Earth, chance had long since been eradicated. Inside the laboratory, Dr. Devon Utak and his staff shuffled nervously as machines made final minuscule adjustments to the capsule's oxygen content. In a moment, they would be in the presence of a man who had planned and guided their work through 5 generations of human endeavor. The visitors, sealed in their pristine suits, barely heard the doors move aside to reveal the shadowy world of red and yellow light. The technicians and scientists bowed as their visitors stepped from the lift. "My Emperor," intoned Dr. Utak. "Dr. Utak, phase 19 is complete." The scientist straightened stiffly. "Oh yes, a pretty baby, very pretty indeed. The Legiones Astartes were instrumental in the early wars that put the Imperium on the galactic map. At the end of the Age of Strife, Earth was a single sovereign planet, which only recently had become free of volatile warp storms. With the sudden dispersal of all of these storms, it became possible once again for spacecraft to travel to and from Earth. Earth's forces had carved out an empire that stretched almost halfway across the galaxy within 200 years. This was the First Crusade. Research and development leading to the creation of the Space Marines were undertaken in the 30th millennium, immediately prior to the beginning of the First Crusade. This work had been conducted in the superbly equipped laboratories built deep inside the planet Earth. The objective of the program was to create a caste of warrior elites, characterized by superhuman strength and unflinching loyalty. These new warriors were organized into their own special units called chapters. Those chapters, created at the time of the First Crusade, are known as chapters of the First Founding. There were originally 20 of these, but only 7 survive in the 41st millennium. Since the First Founding, there have been 25 other occasions when the Emperor has held it necessary to create new chapters. The most recent 26th founding was in the year 738 of the current millennium. And here, we have 5 of the Phase 11 zygotes. The eldest has now been functioning uninterrupted for 14 years. The doctor gestured towards the row of glowing incubators, containing several varieties of organic components in clear bubbling baths. "You call the organs zygotes. Yes, our geneticists create the single germ cell for each new organ. Every cell takes years of work, as you know. At that stage, we can store the cells indefinitely in the zero room as gene seed. Inside the incubator, we can activate and control the growth process. The cell divides, multiplies, and eventually grows out into a whole organ. Until the organ is ready for implant, we refer to it as a zygote." The doctor led the party along the long row of glass cases, past incubators labeled with the names of the strange organs. He stopped before a large door, emblazoned with the Imperial Eagle and the Stark sign. "Security Zone 1, now," announced the doctor. "Now you'll see what all this flesh and gristle really amounts to." As you can see, the exact origins of the Rogue Trader era Space Marines are very different from what we have today. But for me, the most interesting part about all of this is the fact that it only took 2 years for Rogue Trader to take a step closer to what we know now. I even discovered that the 19 gene seed implants we have today and follow the same implantation phases as we see back then. There is, of course, the exception with the organs related to the Primarchs Marines, who obviously did not exist at the time. As a general rule of thumb, the organs are the same, such as the second heart, the multi-lung, and even the black carapace. During this era, we were also introduced to the idea of different chapters having their own mutations. Some lack an organ or have it no longer functioning the same way, and others have new organs or implants added. Naturally, there are many differences. For example, during phase 17, which is the implementation step for the Batcher's glands, it is noted that the Space Wolves have their canine teeth removed or be replaced with longer versions. Overall, becoming a Space Marine also requires hypnotherapy and psychoconditioning. Yet many chapters also perform other rituals, usually mystical practices such as scarring, prayer or fasting, or the infamous eating of brotherly waste presented in a nice bowl for the Imperial Fists. The biggest difference, however, is what happens when someone fails the stages of initiation, but survives. These recruits become insane and very violent. A chapter at full strength is likely to put such recruits out of their misery, but certain chapters that are low on numbers or have particularly barbaric practices might encourage such recruits to be turned into suicide squads. In certain cases, they might literally be strapped with bombs and sent to the enemy as a very spontaneous and explosive gift. As a final note on the creation of Rogue Trader Space Marines, while they are not the transhuman Angels of Death we know today, it is noted in the compendium that they are more than a human with extraordinary powers. While their intelligence and mental abilities can vary like normal humans, they can think and react at lightning speeds, control their senses and nervous system, and have essentially faster than human responses. Some, but not all, Space Marines of the Rogue Trader era do have photographic memories. Now that we have talked about the origins and the creation of the Space Marines, let's take a better look at how a chapter functions and, more importantly, how they interact with the rest of the Imperium. The Space Marines are a unique fighting force within the Imperium that has stayed mostly the same, but on the other side, the Imperial Army, while being much more common, are reserved as garrison troops only. They function as a defensive army and are given to Imperial commanders to defend important installations. But here's something very important. An Imperial commander and the army commanders are very different. An army commander is an officer who answers directly to the Adeptus Terra. Meanwhile, an Imperial commander is what we call today a planetary governor. The Imperial commanders rule the different worlds of the Imperium, being appointed by the Administratum. More importantly, they are not always given a planet, but can sometimes be given command of a continent or special project. While an Imperial commander is duty-bound to the priesthood of the Administratum, they act as independent governors. As long as their taxes are paid and quotas are fulfilled, they can run their worlds however they see fit. An Imperial commander even has the right to recruit and maintain his own armies and interplanetary fleets. Now, why is the mention of the Imperial commander so important in a video about Space Marines? Well, it is because every chapter has both an Imperial commander alongside a chapter leader. And yes, these Space Marine Imperial commanders use power armor and fight right alongside their subordinates as a full battle brother. The other chapter leader is often dubbed the Master of Marines. Both can be ordered by the Adeptus Terra, but both have the right to fulfill their orders as they see fit, as long as they succeed. Now, while this era of 40k being literally called Rogue Trader, I think it is very important to mention that our favorite Buccaneer Merchant Kings are also given a contingent of Space Marines alongside their ship and crew. Of course, these Space Marines can also have rather interesting interactions with the Imperial commanders of various worlds. While a governor cannot command Space Marines if they are not a member of their command structure, many chapters actually pay tithes to them. This is because chapters like to build fortress monasteries on Imperial worlds ruled by Imperial commanders. Many Imperial commanders accept and outright welcome these deals. They get to collect taxes, and there is a fortress of the mightiest warriors in the entire Imperium present to help defend their world. It is totally not confusing that there can be two very different Imperial commanders present on a single world. Fortress monasteries are also quite different. Space Marines like to keep them secret and hidden, but some openly and loudly proclaim their base of operations. But some are not situated on planets at all, but take the form of orbiting spacecraft or hollowed out asteroids at the edge of a system. An example of a typical Space Marine monastery is that of the Space Wolves on the planet of Lucan. Here we learn that the Imperial commander of the Space Wolves, Enoch, is also the governor of the world. We get a full breakdown of the fortress monastery of the Space Wolves, and while this example is super in-depth, I will just quickly cover some of the most interesting bits and pieces. The Assimularum is the largest hall in the base, with only the Great Hall being bigger. In this room, the entire chapter can gather, and mass meetings, religious festivals, and special feasts are held here. Present inside the Assimularum, but partitioned through a removable screen, is the Reclusium. This religious place is tended to by a Reclusiarch and the chapter's most holy relics and trophies. Here there is also an office, as well as 3 chapels, with one dedicated to the founder, but not Primarch of the chapter, Leman Russ, and 2 for the Emperor. There is also the Librarium, which is both the library and record office, which is also the main seat of communications for astropaths. Fun fact, the chapter's chief librarian is also the one in charge of defending the fortress monastery. Every Space Marine gets his own cell, a room for him to sleep and keep his gear in, with these being arranged in blocks of 10 for each squad. The cells are organized based on company, with added administrative office and private chamber for the captain. Of course, every company also gets their own chapel. There are also private chambers, which are reserved for high-ranking members of the chapter, such as the master of the ships. For the non-Space Marines, however, who can range from administrators to naval personnel, there are communal dormitories, which are also more comfortable than the cells of the Marines. The guest chambers, on the other hand, are luxurious apartments with their own private chapel for visiting members of the administratum or other important guests. A fortress monastery cannot be complete without the Penetorium to confine punished Marines or the foundries, where a chapter gets its weapons from. In the foundries, there are special Marines called Brother Artisans. As a military base, a fortress monastery also incorporates several shuttle silos, a teleportarium, and launcher pads with underground hangars. Like I said, the list of rooms goes on and on and on. The fortresses also have a terrarium and a place where exotic foods are grown. In all honesty, if you ever get the chance, I highly recommend you check it out for yourself to see just how different these Astartes fortresses are from what we have today. So far, I have covered a bunch of the general lore of the Rogue Trader era Space Marines, and have already started highlighting some minor differences. But what are actually some of the biggest distinctions between them? Let's start with number 1, the Primarchs. First and foremost, there are no Primarchs, but the idea of them does exist in some way. In the early days of Rogue Trader, the Primarchs were known as the forefathers of the chapters, the person who essentially founded a chapter, as we saw with Leman Russ. The Primarchs are highly revered by some of the Space Marines, which we learn from the compendium I mentioned earlier, but they are not yet the demigod sons of the Emperor as we know them now. In the Warhammer 40K compilation, which came out in 1991, we do get our first glimmer of what is to come. We also saw in the 1987 core rulebook a mention of Lionel Johnson, which is often overlooked. The celebration of the Feast of Malediction by the Dark Angels chapter of Space Marines. This great annual event takes place in the Reclusium of the Dark Angels Space Fortress, which orbits the giant planet Delahan. The feast celebrates the founding of the chapter by Lyn Elgonson at the beginning of the Imperial Crusades, almost 10,000 years ago. The Dark Angels are honored as the first Space Marine chapter. They were founded by the Emperor at a time when he still lived in the conventional sense. Within the chapter, the title of the Dark Angels leader is Custodian, an honor which acknowledges the Emperor as the chapter's true leader. The cup of retribution used in the ritual is said to be the actual vessel from which the Emperor drank at the original founding of the chapter. At the culmination of the feast, the custodian takes a small knife and cuts his thumb so a drop of blood falls into the cup. The cup is then passed all around the assembled fighting brethren, who each add a little of their own blood. Once every warrior has contributed, the contents of the cup are mixed with wine in a number of large open barrels. The cup is then passed from warrior to warrior, each filling it and drinking from the wine in turn. This ancient ritual is sacred to the Dark Angels, and it is considered a bad omen if a long campaign or sudden battle delays the feast. Look, I am not messing with you. This is 100% printed in the Rogue Trader book. The Dark Angels were founded by Lyn Elgonson, which clearly got changed to Lionel Johnson later on. Now, while there aren't really any Primarchs in the early days of Rogue Trader, there are these gods of battle, chance and war that are referenced. In fact, there is even a story that the Emperor came down from high above to offer his blessings to a commander of an imperial army. The story then says the army praised the gods of war, and then they won the said battle. Who are these gods they praised? No idea, but later on, it seems pretty much implied that these gods of war were a foundation towards the idea of demigod Primarch sons. Talking about praising gods, did you know Space Marines were straight Sisters of Battle level religious, like full-on followers of the Ecclesiarchy? Yeah, that's pretty different from the average chapter right now. While researching this video, there was one moment that kinda just stunned me. I remember reading my old Space Marines 3rd edition codex when I just got started with the hobby, and there it talks how most Space Marines are not religious, more like reverent to the Emperor and their forefathers. In Rogue Trader, however, not only is the Fortress Monastery of the Space Wolves I covered earlier literally filled with chapels, but it is also outright stated that all Space Marines are warrior monks. Warrior monks who have their sergeants, captains and commanders as both spiritual and martial leaders. And on top of that, many chapters have their beliefs completely centered around the Imperial cult. The Rogue Trader era Space Marines, of course, had their own rituals, beliefs and expressions, but ultimately all of them are focused on the spiritual hegemony of the Ecclesiarchy. It is kinda wild to see Space Marines that are even more zealous than most Terran pilgrims. But here's a fun one. A lore difference that would give Leandros a heart attack. There was no Codex Astartes back in Rogue Trader. They'd probably laugh at such a book. How can you fight a war when there are instructions? Just go over there and show them what's up. While Space Marines still call each other Battle Brothers, and sometimes even Battle Kin, perhaps the outright biggest difference between the Space Marines of Rogue Trader and today is the lack of the Codex Astartes. The original organization of a chapter consisted of the following: an Imperial Commander, who could also be the governor of a planet, and the chapter leader, who is the Master of Marines and also sometimes called a Lieutenant Commander. Below them are various support personnel such as administrative staff, maintenance teams, transport teams, medical staff, and a communications division. Finally, there are 10 companies, each with a captain, astropath, scribe, physician, and technician. Each company is made up of 10 squads of 9 marines plus their sergeant. The standard armament of a squad is 1 special weapon, 1 heavy weapon, and the sergeant being geared towards melee combat. Non-combatant staff perform all the support roles and are organized accordingly into mechanics, spacecraft crew, and each chapter has its own associated astropaths and navigators. Chapter commanders and leaders are free to organize or augment their troops however they see fit. And yes, there is a literal mention of musical instruments as an example. If you want a bagpipe playing Space Marine, then Rogue Trader is your go-to. Ranks are also interesting, as aside from sergeants and normal battle brothers coming in both normal and veteran versions, there are also veteran captains. Chaplains also exist, but so do the field police. Now, while this might seem very basic and a very bare-bones version of Space Marines compared to today, there's luckily an example chapter giving us extra unit types. In fact, this chapter is the very example from which we can learn how other chapters work. And if you thought it was the Ultramarines, I have bad news. It is actually the White Scars. From the White Scars, we get the Lieutenant Commander role as well as the Company Lieutenant. There is also a Master Apothecary, Chief Librarian, and for both, there are also normal versions, such as Medics and Librarians. We also get a good look at Chaplains and learn that astropaths assigned to a chapter are inclined to fight alongside them. More importantly, the regular Space Marine squad is known as the Tactical Squad. The White Scars also call them Incisors, and they are allowed to upgrade them to Cobra squads by giving them jump packs. There are also the Elite Squads, who are the champions of any given chapter. The White Scars, funnily enough, call them the Soul Drinkers. There's also the Assault Squad, but instead of just using a jump pack and chainsword, they use an extra bolt pistol. Instead of Devastators, we get a squad called Thunderers. And finally, we get the Reconnaissance Squads, who are scouts that go about their missions in full power armor. From this same list, we also get a new look at land speeders, jet bikes, and other vehicles. Honestly, I love that during Rogue Trader, it was the White Scars who were the template on which to build your own Space Marine army. The Crimson Fists and Ultramarines had some lore, but they were not really the example chapter yet, so to speak. Actually, speaking of Ultramarines, let's go over the Traitor Blueberries. Yeah, that's right, the Ultramarines were very strange back then. To keep your attention, I am just going to hit you with a couple of fun facts. The Ultramarines are a 3rd founding chapter, given the number of the banished 13th Legion, who betrayed the Emperor and now reside within the Eye of Terror. And the now remade chapter distinguished themselves during the First Tyrannic War in M34. Yup, in the original Rogue Trader, the 13th Legion were a bunch of traitors, and the Ultramarines founded in M32 during the third founding were their replacements. Keep this information in mind the next time you see your local Ultramarine player. Also, the Ultramarines have been fighting the Tyranids for over 6 millennia, and only recently were given the world of Macragge in the vendor system as a reward for helping destroy High Fleet Behemoth, which they did together with the White Scars and a third unnamed legion. Here they have laid to rest the founder of their chapter in the Reclusium, the not yet Primarch, not yet Avenging Son, and not yet Lord Commander of the Imperium, Robute Guilliman. Now, this is a good reminder that we are still talking about the Ultramarines. So they are one of the Space Marine chapters that have earned the right to call themselves Adeptus Astartes, with their Imperial Commander, Marnius Calgar, holding the title of Adept, a title that puts him on equal footing with other members of the Adeptus Terra and shared exclusively with other chapters that also govern their own world. Also, Macragge is literally Arrakis from Dune, being covered in dust oceans, which has only one resource in its shrimp-like creatures known as dust krill, which are both consumed by the locals and exported to the wider Imperium. Speaking of Marnius Calgar, his full title is Imperial Commander Adeptus Marnius Calgar, the 4th Lord of Macragge, and instead of having lost his limbs to the Swarm Lord, he lost them in a skirmish against High Fleet Perseus. Calgar became Imperial Commander at the young age of 44, and his augments are also weapons built around Jokero digital weapons. Interestingly, while the Codex Astartes is not mentioned, we do get to learn that the Ultramarines in Rogue Trader use what is almost a battle company, consisting of a captain, lieutenant, chaplain, 1 special assault squad, 2 normal assault squads, 1 heavy weapon squad, and 6 tactical squads. Perhaps the most brutal part is that the Ultramarines are willing to decimate an entire company and strip all honors from them as punishment for failure. Very perturbable of them. However, the primary reason I wanted to talk about the Rogue Trader Ultramarines is because of one very specific character, the half Eldar, Ultramarines Chief Librarian and Astropath, Ilian Nastase. Here are some important things to know about him. First of all, being the master of something, such as the master of ships or chief librarian, is an occupation that can be held by a company captain, but also by non-brethren. Non-brethren refers to the members of a chapter who are not actual Space Marines. Of course, non-combatant support staff are always non-brethren, except for the aforementioned brother artisans. A notable fact is that the medical staff of a chapter consists of both battle brothers and non-brethren, with only the full Space Marines ever joining combat. All chapters assign their librarians to join the communication officers as well, to help keep contact with the different worlds of the Imperium, and naturally, they do this together with the Astropaths. And well, even a half-human like Ilian Nastase may join a chapter. But Space Marines are still extremely zealous and xenophobic, so how does his relationship work with some of the full-fledged Battle Brothers and their half-alien counterparts? Well, we get our answer in White Dwarf 97. Captain Asata made his way up the winding steps of the fortress' uppermost battlements. He was not surprised to see the elegant form of Astropath Ilian Nastase staring out sightlessly from the edge of the ramparts. The half-human psyker never failed to unnerve him. As he approached, the shrill voice of the bastard pierced the hot evening air. "Captain Keorn Asata," he announced without turning his head. your footfalls are as distinctive as an amble dancing upon a tile roof. Asata fingered the hilt of his intricately inlaid sword, but thought better of it. Instead, he spat venomously at the dry, sandy ground. "You have picked them up," he growled as he leaned against the hoonstone of a battlement. "They were faint," replied Nastase. "Too faint. I think they must have taken more casualties than anticipated." He turned his strangely delicate Eldarian face directly towards Asata. The Marine was all too aware of those unnaturally alien features. The long aristocratic nose, tight but large lips, and of course, the characteristic sharp ears. Like all astropaths, Nastase was blind. His empty eyes were hidden by dark plasflex hemispheres, just failing to conceal the puckered scar tissue around his eye sockets. "These new recruits don't seem to have the right stuff, damn it. When I first arrived here, I didn't even get the privilege of the amble hunt. No, my initiation took place at the hands of the Tyranids. I've still got scars from the battle, and do you know something?" Nastase awaited the end of the anecdote he had heard countless times before. "Do you know something? They still made me go on an amble hunt as soon as I was out of the Apothecarian." As you can see, Nastase is accepted, treated as appropriate for his rank by Captain Asata, but not really respected. Interestingly, Nastase is not the only mutant within the Ultramarines. There is also Master of the Ships, Christo Columbine, who is a navigator from a house which has lost its ability to navigate. He has webbed feet and hands, and is essentially abhuman. The final thing I want to mention about the Space Marines is that they get to have a lot more sleep compared to what they get today. A total of 6 hours versus the 4 they get now, and even enjoy high tea after the chaplain's cult recital, which might be one of the most British things I have ever heard. But we are not done just yet. Let's take a look at the Horus Heresy from Rogue Trader, the Badab War, which was the great betrayal that made very many Chaos Space Marines. The Badab War is perhaps the most beloved conflict of the entire setting outside the Horus Heresy, and well, it has its origins in Rogue Trader. But what exactly is different? Well, first of all, the reason Luft Huron begins the war is because of his mental destabilization, but also still tax evasion. As Master of the Tiger Claws and Imperial Commander of Badab, he randomly attacked an Imperial investigation fleet. The fleet was sent because of Huron withholding his chapter's gene seed for routine checkups and not paying his tithes for over 150 years. The Tyrant of Badab, as Commander Huron is known in Imperial histories, was a power-hungry and ambitious individual who should never have risen to power within a Space Marine chapter. He was a plainly dangerous individual, able in many respects, but lacking the absolute dedication to humanity vital in a Lord of the Imperium. There are some who have suggested that Huron was either an alien shapeshifter or under the domination of some alien. Others theorize he manifested unexpected psychic powers, but in any case, a focus has been placed on Huron's mental stability, or lack thereof. There were no Wardens of the Maelstrom, or even a Maelstrom, but Huron's rebellion was quickly joined by the Mantis Warriors, Executioners, and Lamenters. Things would only escalate when the Mantis Warriors captured a Firehawk ship, which would result in the 5 chapters fighting it out. The Emperor, yes, the Emperor himself, recalled the Marines errant to protect the local Imperial ships in the sector that fell under attack. The Marines errant were joined by the Red Scorpions and the Minotaurs in their duty. After a couple of years, the shipping lanes were deemed secure, and so the Red Scorpions and Firehawks returned to their normal duties. They were, of course, replaced by the Nova Marines and Howling Griffins. Sieging Badab was a task given to the Star Phantoms. Other chapters were sent to investigate both the Mantis Warriors and Executioners. The Lamenters, sadly, were still beaten by the Minotaurs and forced into an early surrender. But in this version of the story, they didn't get their wounded killed or robbed. Ultimately, Huron would be defeated in various brutal sieges. The Exorcist, Fire Angels, Salamanders, Space Sharks, and Sons of Medusa all getting involved. Essentially, loyalist chapters were rotated in and out of this conflict. The Mantis Warriors, Executioners, and Lamenters were forgiven but had to undertake a 100-year-long crusade. The homeworlds of the Mantis Warriors and Executioners were given over to the Space Sharks and Star Phantoms. Other loyalist forces were given salvage rights from the war zone. The Tiger Claws were all but destroyed. Only a contingent of about 200 warriors fought their way through the Exorcist blockade and escaped into deep space. They have not been heard of since. Of the fate of Imperial Commander Luft Huron, Master of the Tiger Claws, and Tyrant of Badab, nothing is known. So, for those of you who are not familiar with the Badab War, the different chapters that fought during it are the same. The exact hows, whys, and whens they got involved are all different. And even the punishments and rewards are different. Many details are also missing. No GNC theft, no Tyrant's Legion, but we can still recognize that the Rogue Trader version would serve as the basis from which we got our modern story from. I absolutely love that original iteration, but now let's switch our vision around. What stayed the same since first edition? Can we learn anything from its origins that make us understand current day 40k even more? So, while there are many differences between Rogue Trader and current 40k, there are still a surprising number of things that have stayed the same. I could analyze how certain parts of the current Horus Heresy game have been inspired by Rogue Trader, cover details about even more factions that we lost throughout the ages, and I have not even gotten into the Realm of Chaos books that are nearly completely still canon, but we will cover those in a different video in the future. Regarding what has stayed the same, well, to put it bluntly, Space Marine power armor, with but a minor couple of details, has stayed the exact same since 1990, 3 years after Rogue Trader was first released. In White Dwarf 129, Rick Priestley wrote an article on Space Marine power armor, and while it was given a tiny rewrite, much of that is still completely true, as we see in White Dwarf 469 in the article Armor Through the Ages. We also saw the original Space Marine lieutenants back in the 1980s and 1990s, which Primarchs Marines have given a very fun callback to, although maybe a couple too many miniatures. Another interesting fact is that the bolt guns have stayed the exact same since Rogue Trader, shooting a hail of explosive bolts like small missiles. We even see the terms bolt gun and bolter used interchangeably, which we can now confirm have been the same for almost 40 years. It is even stated that a Space Marine standard loadout is and always has been a combat knife or sword, a bolt pistol, a bolter, and some grenades. Hell, they even had service studs back then, with each stud representing 10 years. Also, friendly reminder, not all service studs in 40k represent the same years of service, and each chapter is slightly different. For example, the Dark Angels have their golden studs, representing 100 years, but the Ultramarines have gold, represent 50 years of service, as we see in the novels Ravenwing and Nightbringer respectively. Also yes, since Rogue Trader, the Crimson Fists have been fighting the orcs on their homeworld of Rin's World. The rulebook contains a mission called Battle at the Farm, and this is a team we get to see in the novel Rin's World. Even Pedro Cantor and the Arch Arsonist are named. Of course, my personal little factoid is that every chapter we see in Rogue Trader still exists in modern 40k. I even cover the really strange Mentor's Legion in my members only lore video. But to finish this video off, we need to talk about one more massive difference between Space Marine from back then versus now. Their interactions with the Sisters of Battle, who at times hunted Astartes for perceived betrayals. In Rogue Trader, the Adeptus Sororitas, the Sisterhood, are an order of devoted warrior women, organized in a similar manner to the Space Marines. These women, however, are not soldiers. Instead, they are the agents of the ecclesiarchy, with the authority to kick down the door of any other adeptus or department of the Imperium, and rigorously test them for genetic mutation and psychological status. They keep a close eye on literally everyone in the Imperium, ensuring they are faithful, loyal, and free of taint. Entire companies of Battle Sisters travel to war zones, and even the fortress monasteries of the Space Marines. Literally no one is safe from their vigilance, and there is even an artwork of a sister named Sister Sin killing Brother Vermilion of the Rainbow Warriors. In all but name, they did the same thing as the Inquisition does now, just with fervent flame and 1980 skulls on their breastplates. So yeah, Rogue Trader was a truly different era of 40k. I would say as a whole, 30% of Rogue Trader lore was kept, and the rest was reworked but still inspired by it. It took only 4 years for us to get a better look at the Primarchs, and in 1993 we got 40k 2nd edition. Many people like to put 2nd edition in the same category as Rogue Trader, but in all honesty, I think doing so is a crime, as a much larger part of 2nd edition lore is still kept to this day. Of course, not everything has been kept, but many important characters can find their origins in this edition, like Dante, Abaddon, Huron Blackheart, Karn the Betrayer, and Azrael, to name but a few. Now, I do want to take a quick moment to talk about the rules. I admit, I have not played Rogue Trader just yet, but I have a genuine interest in trying it out someday. I even ordered a bunch of models like 20 hours ago, considering that the 3rd edition, which was my 1st edition, still shares some rules, such as the stat line. I do want to make a quick comparison. For those uninitiated in the glorious world of tabletop battles, models form squads, and each model has a stat line. In Rogue Trader, there are M for movement, WS for weapon skill, BS for ballistic skill, S for strength, T for toughness, W for wounds, I for initiative, A for attacks, LD for leadership, INT for intelligence, CL for cool, and WP for willpower. Now, I won't go too in depth, but in Rogue Trader, the higher a stat line, the better it is. Back then, per example, ballistic skill had a chart, but essentially, you could subtract your BS from 7 to determine what you needed to roll to hit. So a BS of 4 meant you would hit on a 3+. Most stats should be recognizable for a lot of you. but int, CL and WP are of course gone. In this era of 40k, a Space Marine had force in weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength and initiative, a 3 for toughness, 1 wound, 1 attack, and 8s in all mental based stats like leadership. Everything a Space Marine has a 4 or 8 in, a normal human has a 3 or 7 in. So in every department, a Space Marine has a 33% better dice roll. At the end of Rogue Trader, all Space Marines got a +1 to their toughness, and this has been their base stat line until 8th edition. 8th edition saw a massive overhaul to the tabletop. While strength, toughness, wounds and attacks worked the same, other stats will be changed over the course of time in how they worked. Sadly, initiative, which is my favorite method of doing melee, was also removed in 8th edition. But yeah, comparatively speaking, Space Marines in Rogue Trader are just as powerful, if not more so, than they are in 10th edition, as they had a much better time in melee and there were fewer high-strength weapons. Oh, and a quick reminder on what special weapons Space Marines could take back then. Flamers, graviton gun, melta gun, plasma gun, needler, and yes, a goddamn Eldar shuriken catapult. Now, if you thought that was the only weapon the Space Marines stole from other factions, here is the selection for their heavy weapons. The beamer, D-cannon, grenade launcher, heavy plasma gun, heavy bolter, las cannon, missile launcher, multi-laser, and multi-melta. In all honesty, I think Space Marines should go back to stealing guns from other factions. If they can have an Eldar D-cannon as a weapon choice, I want to see a Space Marine use a Gauss Flare so bad. But what do you think of all of this? Which iteration of Space Marines is your favorite and why? Would you like GW to bring back certain aspects of Rogue Trader Astartes? Or are they perfect the way they are now? And of the 5 main differences we have covered today, which one is your favorite? I'm also just blown away by how different the setting was back then, and personally hope they make a small side game based on this original vision of Warhammer 40,000. Let me know your comments, concerns, suggestions, theories and ideas down in the comment section below. If you think I deserved it with this video, please leave a like and hit that subscribe button. It helps push this video into the algorithm and it would make me very happy. Thank you for watching and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. Bye bye. Shout out to War Thunder again for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to check out War Thunder now for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox or on mobile, both iOS and Android. And use the links in my pinned comment or video description below to register and join the battle. Those of you who are new or haven't played for 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across PC and console, including multiple premium vehicles, in-game currency and more. There is no better time to sign up than right now.